Another reason you might want to melt your butter or heat the heavy cream before you add it is that anything cold that you add to your sweet potatoes is going to cool the sweet potatoes down and make them a little less appetizing when they get to the table. And of course, we need salt. I'm going to add just about a teaspoon here. I think that's going to be about 4 pinches. They're large pinches of salt. And you always want to taste. Make sure you got your seasonings right. It's delicious, exactly what I had in mind. This recipe calls for 3/4 of a cup of cornmeal. So that's going to be a 1/2 cup plus 1/4 of a cup. The way that I measured the cornmeal was to scoop directly into the container. You can't do that with flour, because if you do, you're going to compact the flour and it's going to come out denser. There's going to be more flour than you should have. So the way around that is simple. You want to scoop out flour from your large container. Do it over the container because there will be some that will spill back out of your measuring cup. And now you see I've got that domed higher than the top. I like to set my knife in it and then level it. Now we need 1½ tablespoons of baking powder. This is a really nice container for it. It's got, like the way we used our knife was to level off the top of our measuring cup. We're going to do the same thing with our spoons. Here's a tablespoon. And notice I'm putting that right in with the flour because we're going to be sifting it all. There's a tablespoon. In order to make a 1/2 tablespoon, you're going to need a teaspoon plus a 1/2 teaspoon, because there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. So 1/2 of 3 is 1 1/2. How about that? We need a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Again, we're going to be leveling off the top of our spoon, putting it directly in with our flour. We've got our flour, our baking soda, and our baking powder. The next thing we need is a tablespoon of sugar. And that one I just shook the spoon to level it off. And the last thing we need is 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Again, we can just shake the top to make it flat. Holding this over the cornmeal, and I'm going to, using my large spoon, just stir. And I don't know if you can see down into the bowl, but it's sifting down very nicely over the cornmeal. So I have my trusty heavy iron skillet, which is traditionally the best thing to use when you're making cornbread. If you don't have it, you can use a cake pan, but don't tell my husband. He gets upset when I suggest it. He's from Oklahoma. It's got to be just so. I have found that a little bit of pan spray helps the cornbread come out of the pan easily when I'm done. I'm going to turn the heat on to a medium-low, which is on my stove about the number 3. So it's not a very big flame. And I'm now using about 1/4 of a stick of butter. This is my secret. Many times when you order cornbread in a restaurant, you'll notice that it seems stale immediately when it arrives at your table. This I find intolerable. So what I've done on my own authority is I add about 1/2 stick of butter to the wet ingredients for my cornbread. The extra fat helps the cornbread retain its moisture and it stays fresher longer. So it's not diet food, but I'm okay with that. This is my 1/2 stick of butter. We're going to melt it. It's very important that these be at room temperature. I've had these out for several hours. If they're cold, it's going to screw up your baking time, and you run the danger of the butter, once you've melted it, congealing when you add it to the wet ingredients. 1 1/2 cups of buttermilk, 1/2 stick of butter, 2 large eggs. Everything is warm. It's not cold to the touch. We're going to add it to our dry ingredients, and with a few strokes of our rubber spatula, we're going to incorporate everything together. This has a nice, sour, almost yogurty smell because of the buttermilk. Our batter's ready, the pan's ready, the oven is preheated to 425 degrees. We're ready to go. Everything's all together. Let's pop it in the oven. We're going to be checking it in 20 minutes. It could take as long as 25, but it could be done in 20. Let's cross our fingers. Our cornbread has been in the oven for 25 minutes, and it should be done. Let's have a look, shall we? Now, I know I sound like a broken record, but this is an iron skillet. It's in a hot oven, so oi gewalt, be careful. It's nice and golden on top. It's beginning to get really dark around the edges, but that's fine. This is exactly how it should look. Now, you got to flip this out and put it on a rack. And what I like to do is with my mitt, carefully, because there's oil in here, let's flip it upside down. And then I take my rack and place it on the bottom and flip it back over. So our cornbread is done, and it's beautiful. If I do say so myself, which I did.